Seeking. You haven't uploaded in almost like 2 months. I know you've had some like pretty crazy stuff that you've been working on, but
What's good, everybody? I am pretty late with this, but Happy New Year. I hope you all have been having a great and healthy 2021 so far. The world is a pretty crazy place right now, so be sure to stay safe out there. I've been pretty busy lately, you know, doing my own thing.
Oh my, okay.
Guys, how do we win? It's a 4v1. Statistically proven, I should not win.
But I'm getting back into it now, so hopefully I don't go another 2 months without uploading after this. Today I'm joined with Liger, and we're going to be going over a few tips that could help you improve at Rod PvP in Minecraft. This video is going to cover the basics, and in the next video we are going to go deeper into some more advanced mechanics. If you enjoyed the video and found it helpful, be sure to subscribe and comment any questions you have. Let's try and hit a massive 10 likes this video, so be sure to pound that like button. So first of all, you need to understand why you actually use a rod. A lot of tutorials out there state it as stopping your opponent's movement so that you can get a combo on them. Now, don't get me wrong, that's definitely true, but there's a lot more to it than just combos. Rodding gives you opportunities to get free hits on your opponent. A big thing about Rod PvP is that you can't go into it with strictly the mindset of combos equals success. Combos look cool and are definitely good, but there's more to the formula than just combos. You're inevitably going to fight people that you literally just can't combo or win trades with. If you can't out-hit someone and you want to win, it's going to come down to how good your spacing is and how you manage free hits. It may not make sense yet, but by the end of part 2, it'll all come full circle.
So for rodding, you're going to want to pick a good spot in your hotbar to put your rod in and to have an easy to reach keybind on your keyboard or your mouse. This is called hotkeying. For what slot to actually use, that honestly comes down to personal preference. I know Seeking uses his 3rd slot because it's really quick for him to switch to that. And I personally keep it in my 9th slot. I have it set to a side button on my mouse because that's easy for me. Now you could scroll, but it's much less efficient than hotkeying because, for example, if your rod isn't in the next slot over from your sword, you're going to have to scroll through multiple items and multiple hotbar slots to get to your rod, which can be a lot less precise because you might scroll past it or you might scroll too short of it and it might end up, really hurting you in the fight. And the same thing goes for other items too, like lava, water, splash potions. I mean, overall, it's just much more efficient to hotkey if you have that ability and you can do that.
Has your rod ever broken when you're fighting somebody? Does your fishing rod have too much friction and not enough lubrication and tears frequently? Well, you should look into infinite rodding. Once you get used to your hotkeys with switching between your sword and rod, this should be pretty easy. What you want to do is cast your rod, switch to another hotbar slot, and when you switch back to your rod, it won't take durability. The key to this is that you aren't reeling your rod back in. Start utilizing this so that your rod doesn't break mid-fight. This is why we said getting used to your hotkeys is important, because the faster you can do this, the better. If you need a visual representation of this, here's my setup. My sword is in my 1 slot, my rod is in my 3 slot. I start off in 1, switch to 3, right click once, and go back to 1 and repeat. Now this is no aiming tutorial, but having steady aim is really important. Regardless of your clicking method, whether you jitter click, butterfly click, normal click, or tractor click, you better be able to aim properly with it. I'm not saying that your clicks per second don't matter, but you should prioritize improving your aim over breaking your arm to click 20 CPS. Don't get me wrong, low CPS players have it way harder than high CPS players. I speak from experience, but aiming is a much bigger factor than clicks. Tweak your sensitivity, try different clicking methods, use different grips, and practice with them. If your aim sucks normally, it will most likely lead you to having really bad rod accuracy because you can't control your crosshair efficiently. I'm not saying you gotta click slow, but practice and put the time in. When it comes to aiming and placing your rods, you want to get used to how they travel through the air and how they react to when you move in different directions. For example, when you're strafing left and your crosshair is neutral, the rod path feels like it leans more towards your right side because you're moving left, and vice versa for strafing right. This is because once you cast a rod, it travels in the air as if you were standing still at the exact position you casted it. You could be strafing left, strafing right, or standing still, but your rod is still going to travel in the same direction according to where your crosshair was placed. The bobber doesn't travel with you when you move, it's static, so that's why it feels like it leans in the opposite direction you're moving in, like I stated earlier. If you don't understand what I mean, take this clip for example. I'm moving in all directions, but my rod still lands in the same spot. Once you understand how this works, start factoring in the ability to move your crosshair, and you'll be able to purposefully place your rods where you want them to go because you'll understand how they move. In some situations, you can aim directly at the player. In other situations, you'll want to intercept them mid-strafe. What I mean by that is, if your opponent is moving a lot, you can try reading where they're going to strafe, rod in that direction, and then move in if your guess was right. As you play more, you'll get better at reading people's movement. This comes with experience. Your connection will be a factor as well and will determine how delayed your rods cast, so you need to adjust accordingly with your spacing, which we'll get into next. When it comes to crosshair placement, this is something I can improve on as well, but aiming at the upper portion of the player around the neck is ideal because it maximizes the amount of reach you can get with your hits. If your opponent is above you, you should still try to keep your crosshair as horizontal as possible. They're above you, so you'll be able to reach further than they can. When you rod, you want to make sure you aren't rodding too closely because you might give them a free hit on you and it might carry over into a combo, which is not what you want. This clip here is an example of really bad spacing on my end. I'm rodding when the player is way too close to me and he just ends up getting free hits, so I lose the trade by a lot, as you can see. You're never going to have a perfect success rate with this, but you want to keep this in mind when you play so that you minimize the amount of free hits you lose to a spacing error like that by making sure you don't rod too closely. Messing up your spacing for just one exchange like that could cost you the entire fight against a good player because they'll notice that, they'll take advantage and use that opportunity to be aggro and apply pressure on you. If you're too close to rod them but you don't feel comfortable in the trade for whatever reason, turn around and back up the best you can, rod them away, and then reset the exchange.
So another thing is that you don't want to be too far away either. There's like a so-called sweet spot. However, this is where things get a little bit more complicated. Timing and spacing really just varies upon the individual due to connection. So honestly, like whatever works for us isn't guaranteed to work for you. If your ping is higher, your rods might cast a little bit later, so you'll need to time your rods a little bit differently compared to players on low ping. Your knockback will also be different, which is another factor, but that's not something we're going to get into right now in this video. There really isn't any exact formula for this either. Everyone has a unique connection, and no video is going to make you just like magically amazing at spacing. It's something that you kind of just learn over time with practice. We can provide good examples of it that work for us, but again, there's really no easy formula for spacing. A good spot to start is to recognize when you're too close to rod, and then working from there, you'll be able to gauge the distancing a little bit better, and it might make it a little bit easier to time and space and all that good stuff.
Rodcritting and rodtricking are basically the same thing. The actual definition for each isn't really set in stone, so for the sake of this video, we're going to refer to rodcritting as simply rodding someone, jumping, and getting a critical hit on them. There's a little trick with this. If you time your rod crits right, you can deal twice the damage, which is what we'll call a rod trick. Again, the terms aren't set in stone, and people use them interchangeably. That's just how we're going to define them for this video. With rod critting, you can get more out of free hits. Best case scenario is you land a rod crit without your opponent trading a hit back on you. Sometimes if I want to do this and the spacing is weird, I kind of W tap or S tap while I'm at the peak of my jump as I get the critical hit, and it allows me to go in and out of their hit range if my timing is on point, which kind of is the idea of sprint resetting in general, which we get into next. You can watch my keystrokes as I do it. It works especially well when you catch them as they're jumping midair because they can't dodge it and they're kind of stuck in the air for a moment if they don't counter rod you. It's also useful when you're fighting someone who doesn't use their rod much, but they still trade with you and get crazy hits, so you can just keep rod critting them and you'll win those trades because you're dealing more damage.
So earlier in the video, we mentioned something called rodtricking, and what this is in simple terms, it's a type of rod critting that deals extra damage. To perform one, you basically need to land a crit on your opponent with your sword within half a second after rodding them. This is why some people's rod crits will do an unbelievable amount of damage, and then other times it might not do so much. It's basically the same mechanic as rod critting, except the timing is just much more precise.
Now that's a lot of damage!
Alright, so earlier in the intro, we mentioned that you should see rodding more as a way to get free hits and not just a way to combo people. In no way were we discouraging going for combos in rod PvP. All we were saying was that you should broaden your mindset to free hits as well. When it comes to combos, you can incorporate sprint reset methods into rod PvP like W tapping, S tapping, and block hitting. When you rod someone, ideally they'll be stuck in the air for a slight moment, and in that period of time you can go in for a combo if the spacing is right. Earlier in the video, I talked about spacing and timing, and this is where that will really be important, and it really also, like I said, varies upon your connection. You don't want to start combos too close to the other players because that'll end up just for the trade. Or if you're able to hit them out of the trade through block hitting, then that's really good. Otherwise, you're going to want to take advantage of opportunities where they miss their rods on you to move in and translate that momentum over into a combo for yourself.
Side note about sprint resetting, regardless of whatever method you use, this can apply to you. Most tutorials out there define sprint resetting as dealing more knockback to the opponent. This is true, but you should also see it as a way to distance yourself from the opponent. Thinking about it in those terms helped me a lot personally. I don't really see many people explain it in that specific way. Think about it like driving in a car behind another car. You have to maintain a certain amount of distance between the car you're following, so you can't go too fast, otherwise you'll crash into them. So you have to match their speed accordingly. If they slow down, you slow down too, so that you can maintain that distance. With sprint resetting, you're maintaining that distance and constantly going in and out of their hit range, which is why they can't hit you. Minor thing, but it might help some people when it's put in those words.
So that's pretty much all we have for this episode. The biggest takeaway should be that practice makes perfect, as cliche as it sounds. Take the time to work on all of these aspects that we covered in this video: rod accuracy, spacing, rod crits, combos, and work on combining it all with your own playstyle. There's a very wide range of servers that you can play on to practice, such as Minemen, Lunar, and PvP Land. They all have unranked kits. Another option is Hypixel, but it gets pretty laggy during the day. And I guess if you want to play on Hypixel, we would recommend to play at night if you're like NA or whatever. You know, if you're on this side of the globe. We specifically recommend the classic kit on Minemen though. It's a really good way for you to practice strictly rod and sword PvP.
This is our first tips and tricks video, so let us know what we did well, what we can improve on for next time, and comment questions you want us to answer in part 2, and we'll cover it. Part 2 is going to revolve around playstyles and more advanced mechanics. It will be coming soon depending on how this video does. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share the video with your friends and comment your thoughts. We'll see you soon.